Kodamai, good day and welcome everyone. My name is Craig Bleakley and I am the Safety Risk Consultant here at EcoPortal. We firmly believe that we all win when we share and we collaborate on what works for keeping people safe. So we regularly host safety leaders and experts in an effort to share knowledge across the HSEQ and business communities. In today's session, we're so very pleased to welcome Hudson Global Consulting Operational Risk Management Consultant, that's a mouthful, Tim Hudson, to the virtual stage to share his tips on transforming safety culture. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Tim Hudson is a global thought leader in risk management and risk culture. Tim is currently engaged in developments in the risk space and cultural theory understanding. This is led by a desire to marry theoretical rigor with usability and real-world understanding. The new understanding is used to find efficient and effective ways of improving rather than being bound to buzzwords and slogans. He consults for senior leadership and boards in the QH, SSE, SD, and risk and medium to large-scale businesses operating in a range of industries, including aviation, oil and gas, mining, and healthcare. He has helped create true change within organizations as a founding partner of Hudson Global Consulting. He has a background in theoretical physics and business management, pretty fancy, and this enables him to have a unique perspective on the challenges on modern operations. Now, that's all out of the way. I'm going to relinquish the virtual microphone. Tim, good morning. It is 4 o'clock in the morning in France, as I understand. So thank you very much for getting up so early and sharing your amazing experiences, stories, and expertise. Welcome and over to you.
Good afternoon, Craig. Thank you very much. It's an honor and privilege to be able to talk to you, everyone, and bring along the new parts we're working on. So that's a fun part of what we do, and I won't consider it one of the things I try and do in my life is improve the world. So this is what we do. So what we're talking about today is the new understanding about about safety culture and about the safety culture ladder. And I know that an awful lot of the world, especially in Australia and New Zealand, the safety culture ladder is quite a concept, and it's my father's work from starting in 1991. So it's been around for quite a while now. So that's 35 years. Moving from pathological, where we really don't care about safety, and it's just not a culture of safety, from reactive, where we try and work on safety, but we don't understand it, through calculative, where we can often feel very hemmed in with all the systems we have. Proactive, where we're trying to look ahead and actually solve problems before they turn up, to this generative way of thinking about safety, where it's just the way we do business around here. It's used in millions of industries, millions of different parts in the world, and it allows us to understand what we do. Now, it's been around, as I said, for about 35 years now, and what I've been doing personally is been trying to understand actually how it works. So the structures that lie underneath it, and this is maybe the link back into being more business and more physics minded, is that psychologists are very good at describing what they find out, but they're not always very good at describing why it works and how it works. And that's okay, because we can't actually describe the underlying mechanisms before we can't understand the underlying mechanisms before we found it. So we've always used the HSE roadmap as a way of understanding where we are, and later on in my career, certainly what we've been doing is using it as a roadmap. How can we get better? Looking at it as just pathological to reactive is putting things in place. Reactive to calculative is putting things in operation, and then moving from calculative to proactive is making sure that things that maybe even are there are actually becoming effective and actually delivering the value you want. And we're still working on what that last jump is. So this space is certainly not fully described yet. But I've got an element here from the Royal Australian Air Force, and it says safety culture defined as the product of individual and group values, attitudes, competencies, patterns of behaviour that determine the commitment to, style of, and proficiency of an organisation's safety programs, or the values and practices that we share with each other as defined by a group. But what we like to see it here is who we think we are, what we believe in, and what's important to us. It's the way we do things around here when no one else is looking, or also when everyone else is looking as well. It's a much easier way of looking at it. And culture really is just literally how we do things, how we inform ourselves, how we make sure we know what we're doing, and how we actually execute the work. So when we think about culture, it can be this large amorphous thing, but it can also be a much smaller thing that allows us to understand it's just what we do. And the reason why we talk about culture is because it keeps coming up as one of the reasons why things go wrong. When we look at culture nowadays, and then the true new way of understanding it is that culture is our shared stories, our shared understanding of how, for safety culture, is how things go wrong. So our causal model. Now, is it when in the pathological part, it's bad people? We should hire better people that don't screw up, or we've had bad luck. In reactive, it's much more linear and deterministic. A causes B, thus we should stop doing A. For calculative cultures, we start to understand that it's non-linear, that the outcomes can be either very small or very big, and that's not very dependent on the actual causal factors. When we look at proactive, we start to understand that it's non-linear and non-deterministic. So it doesn't actually matter what you said or how you've done it, it's about the probabilities that things will go wrong. And in generative, it's a much more of a dynamic understanding. Now, I understand that this doesn't really make sense at the moment, but that's why we're going to talk through it in a couple of case studies before I get back to Craig to make sure that we actually understand what we're talking about. So, when we look at the underlying structures, and that's the key part, that's what we're trying to talk about here. In pathological, we have no structure. We don't worry about safety. It is not a culture of safety. In reactive, we worry about safety. We are a culture of safety, but we are unstructured. We don't structure it properly to make sure that things happen. As we go through calculative, we start to bring in structures. And then in proactive, we realize that our rigid structures that we've built in calculative don't work anymore. They're not fit for purpose. So we become what we call context sensitive. We start to understand that the local variations are important for our rule sets as well. And in generative, which is the hard one here, we're also internally context sensitive. So depending on the context, externally and internally, our decision-making processes move around. So reactive. This is one of my clients. They're the Dutch infrastructure ministry. They're called Rijkswaterstaat. They came to me going, Tim, we're proactive and we're doing really well, but we're not doing quite well enough. And they saw proactive as being enthusiastic and being passionate about what they do. But they're not actually proactive. They're actually just reactive. They didn't know what all the safety processes they were using. They didn't have risk management processes properly mapped out. In fact, one of the things we did was look at all their different recommendations and find out what had happened with them. And out of a set of 250 that we found, they only had 100 in a database. One of the ways you can know you're being reactive and want to be proactive, and the structures we use to move from reactive to proactive, is actually, are we putting things down in databases rather than in the minutes of meetings? Because if we have the minutes of meetings, no one else has overview about what's happening. my client, very luckily at least, has accepted that they're not as high as they are and are working very hard to get there. And how are they doing that? By turning things from unstructured to structured. This is going to be a repeating refrain. I also have a MRO client, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul client, that have been working, having moved themselves from pathological into reactive, found themselves wanting to make the next step change. So what does the next step change look like? It's taking the processes they have and turning them into formal processes. It's taking the understanding they have and making sure they're closing plan, do, check, act cycle so that their review processes are actually working. Not in a pro forma way, but actually properly looking at all their systems. So when they had a towing checklist, because they're reactive, they've learned from all their mistakes, it was 17 pages long. And yet they still kept on losing wingtips. When they actually closed the PDA cycle on that and actually learned from their mistakes, they found out that there was a lot in there that was wrong. There was a lot in there that was no longer valid. But most importantly, there was a lot in there that they could learn from. They turned it from a 17-page standard operating procedure to a 3-page standard operating procedure. That enabled them and allowed them to carry out their operations more efficiently, with a higher quality and a higher safety level, by becoming more calculative. They used their structure to drive the changes inside of their operations. They standardized, and they standardized from 17 pages to 3 pages. Now, this is the Deepwater Horizon as it's still on fire. It's a case study that's very close to my heart, because I spent 2 years working for Halliburton and as a consulting expert on the Deepwater Horizon and all the problems around it on what was then the world's largest lawsuit. And this is an example of when you don't have correct structures. BP decided to not grandfather the Deepwater Horizon and the Deepwater Horizon MC252 well into their new management system, because they thought it would be done by then. Their culture was still reactive, so they were happy when they were allowed free from the constraints. They weren't looking for structure. So all the fallible decisions that were made that led up to the failure on the Deepwater Horizon were never properly subjected to the management controls that a management system would have put in place. The single decision to not use their operating management system, the OMS, cost BP $65 billion, because their culture was not calculative. We work in a structured fashion. It was much more reactive. We worked to try and get the job done. So what does calculative look like, and what does calculative mean for moving? How do we move out of calculative? Because a lot of organizations, and I'm pretty sure a lot of them, but the audience today is actually stuck in a quite calculative mindset. We have a lot of processes, we have a lot of systems, there's a lot of checks, there's a lot of ways of understanding. The problem with calculative is, or the challenge we have with calculative, let's put it that way, is that the system we've built and the box we've put ourselves in does not always quite fit what actually happens on the work floor. To do that, we need to be more context sensitive. And with that, I mean, we need to actually understand the context that every part of the work is conducted in. Now, the reason I have an engine mechanic here is I'm going to want to talk about one of my clients. There's a MRO in engines, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul organization in aviation and engines. They were finding that far too many of their risk decisions and their quality decisions were going all the way up the chain. So they were being very slow and they were suffering from quality issues. Now, for them, it's a quality issue. For us as a public, that means it's an airworthiness issue, which is a process safety issue. What they did, and this is interesting and fun, is they used the opportunity to move the decision-making process downwards. They built what they call cross-functional teams that allowed them to decide at the right place and the right point the lower level decisions that could be made. I'm doing precisely the same thing with my clients over in the Philippines as well. It enabled them to empower the people to make the risk decisions that they are already able to and were trained for. They had to make sure that they understood which decisions they were and how they were going to be decided. But it enabled a 95% reduction in escalation factor. That meant that the decisions are being made closer to where the risks are actually being taken, which means the understanding of the risks is so much better. Another example is transport we've done in Africa. And you will understand that road transport in Africa is a challenging area. But the best people to tell you about the conditions in the road in Africa are the people that drive them. So how using an approach that organized it and made sure that they checked in every 10 minutes, a calculative approach. We also put in place a proactive approach where the drivers themselves decided whether or not they were going to be driving. They informed each other. Management was not involved. They informed each other about road conditions, and the go or no-go decision was left up to them. So it was context sensitive. It allowed understanding of what the context was that was happening. So what does generative look like? Because generative is this weird place that everyone wants to be and I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest, because people really don't understand what's happening. A good example is Southwest Airlines. Now, they've had some issues with their maintenance and they've had some issues with aging airframes, but their core operation, how they run their business, is still generative. They have a turnaround time from getting to the gate, from landing to leaving again, that can be under 20 minutes. And the way they do this is that the people on the planes and the dispatchers decide when the planes move. Unlike a standard airline where it is all set in a schedule and it is all very calculative and just defined what's happening, the pilots and the dispatchers decide what happens. Now, the way they do this, of course, is they train the dispatchers to be pilots and they train the pilots to be dispatchers, so they understand the issues that are going on. But they also have to trust and empower their dispatchers, their pilots, to actually do that. The interesting part, of course, is that they've built their whole business model around it. Southwest operates like a bus much rather more than a traditional airline, and they make a lot of money doing it. But it also enables them to be very attuned to any potential risks there are and allow them to make decisions when the risks are too high to stop things happening. Another generative organization is a coal mine that used to exist in Australia, which is a very interesting thing to talk about. But it was a coal mine where the coal miners made all the decisions. The manager described it as the lunatics running the asylum. The guys that were actually digging the coal would make the decisions where they were going to go in the next week, in the next month, and in the next 6 months. They were the most productive coal mine in Australia at that point, because they weren't being micromanaged. They were managing the best part they could. So the reason why we want to be generative, or we want to be proactive, is not only because it enables us to manage our risks on the downside better, it also enables us to manage our risks on the upside better. The hard part is, how do we do that, and how do we get there? Because cultures are not a single coordinate. They're a collection of individuals. And what we found is that the organization will create a culture depending on their shared understanding of how the world works, their shared causal model. It's what the sociologists have been saying for years. Our shared stories are our culture. So if you want to change it, if you want to develop it, if you want to move it forwards, it starts with senior management and it filters down through the organization. If senior management doesn't have a proper advanced model of the world, then culture can't progress. We're not going to be able to change our culture, how we do things, by having a poster campaign. We need to change our culture by changing how we see the world. So rather than having a full-time death by PowerPoint presentation, I thought I'd throw the floor open to Craig, and we could have maybe a conversation that actually brings us into, to be context sensitive, which is the key part here, into your client's context.
Thanks, Tim. That's a really great sort of framework that you've created so far in terms of this topic. I think what you've just talking about then is a real key first up initial conversational piece, which is around the senior leadership component and element. So there's a few different components around that. And I know a lot of the people that will be sitting on this particular will love the aspirational goal of moving, to the right direction on that safety ladder in terms of creating a cultural level that is more productive and more efficient and more effective. However, the biggest gap or the biggest barrier or blockage is actually getting, well, there's a few of them, but let's first talk about how do we, is it encourage? How do we empower? How do we demand from our safety leaders that they need to start not only talking the talk, but really walking the talk? So from the people, and you just mentioned before, the great case studies, whereas when the workers were the ones leading the change, if you're getting this big upswell of opinion or upswell of desire from the workers on the ground that want improvement, but they're hitting this wall, hitting this roof of just pushback, what do you recommend, or what have you seen work to actually get the management, the owners, the directors to buy into good outcomes?
The hardest part is getting that buy-in, and that's really the hardest part in safety culture change. I spent 6 months banging my head against an executive vice president who was the COO at that point about whether or not we followed the rules or not. And my 2-year program, I knew I'd won and it was going to work after 6 months, when he finally admitted, okay, sometimes we don't follow the rules. There's no silver bullet.
No.
There's no simple answer. The hard part is you're going to have to convince them. The good part is, look, there's a lot out there. There's an awful lot. If we can move their paradigm even slightly, we can get things going. So most of my clients are trying to move to a proactive space, and I help them move into a much more probabilistic understanding of of how it works. But even if you can get your boss to move from a linear to a non-linear understanding, you're already winning the battle. The answer is you need to understand that what you're doing. This is one of the key parts where we've really moved the needle, I think, on our understanding of what the ladder is we need to change their understanding of why things go wrong. I don't need them to make posters. I don't need to make videos. Once we've moved the needle, they'll do that anyway. What they need to do is understand that, for example, every accident has at least 50 different causal factors. So that's the way it is. That's they need to understand that. They can't just look at and go, hey, I wish he'd done better. We'll fire him, we'll get someone else. Understanding the organizational part in accident causation, understanding how they play a part is a key. And you have to remember that your senior management is not, they on the whole, they're quite desperate to change the way things are done. They just don't know how. What they don't realize is they have to change their understanding before they can change everyone else's understanding. And that's, I think, the really key message I would pass on that is, if we can help them understand how they play a role,
yep,
you empower them, and then they can empower the rest. One of the hardest parts of senior management really is that, well, what do I do? I've done poster campaigns. I've gotten people in.
I have to say, interestingly, looking at New Zealand and the Australian clients and companies that I've been quite intimately involved in, when you look at safety culture, improvements of safety culture, especially those that are moving from probably reactive to more calculative, maybe into the proactive space, there's a real dichotomy and a real balance of those that have been pushed there through a carrot and some that have been pushed there through the stick. I.e., something's gone wrong, someone's been hurt, there's been an event or multiple events, and they've gone, we have to make an improvement because the legislator, the regulator are coming down heavy on us, and they make improvements because of that. Or it's from the carrot. They're going, hey, there's a strategic business advantage for us to do this. There are reputational improvements for us to do this. There are obviously internal recruitment and outcomes in terms of the safety culture. So we will do it for the right reason. Have you come across those two on a global speed, those two different motivations to get to a good point? And do you see, has there been any difference of either staying in the proactive and then maybe falling back, or even improving depending on what's been their initial motivator?
Oh, well, yes. So I'm a big stick and carrot person anyway, to be honest. Look, the answer is, if you're forced to do it by an external party, especially regulatory, you've not changed your own the senior management way of looking at it. So it's always going to be a feet dragging exercise. So you might have the processes and the structures, but does the organization believe? Now, give it 5-10 years, it'll filter out anyway. It will happen anyway. But the real change comes when you really want, you desire, and the desire starts at the top, because your paradigm has changed, because you understand that your causal model has changed, to actually gain all the positive parts out of it. The hard part is, and the fun part is, look, if the regulator requires it, then you might as well go there. And for safety managers, that's an opportunity to then use. I always say there's no such thing. You have to use a crisis, right? And we've already paid for lunch. We might as well eat it. So what you want to really do is, okay, so we're being forced to do this. We're under an enforcement action, or our licensed operator is being threatened. I now have a stick to beat my management with. They now have to sit down and listen and actually change their paradigm as well. And if you can use it to do that and change how the organization thinks about risk, this is why I don't talk about safety. I talk about quality. I talk about environment. So it's all just risk. If we think about risk differently, we will think about our business risk differently. We will think about our financial risk differently as well. So every step up the ladder, and the thing is that there's more and more, there's an increasing amount of investment required. So we can't always do that. No. But if our risks are simple, we don't need to do that either. But if our regulator is beating us up, then probably our risks are more complex than we thought.
Yep.
But the regulator is there for a reason. And they should provide the minimum standard, not the maximum standard. The answer, of course, is yeah. It's a hard thing to do, especially when you're externally required.
So we've got management on board, senior leadership team get it. The guys on the ground and the tools exposed to the key risks of the organization get it. the often the next big barrier are those middle management level that may have been in that role for a long time, that won't be going to jail or exposed to fines or prosecutions, and that want to rock up, do their job, often do the minimum that they require. They are often the biggest barrier. Obviously, we can, when we put our recruitment through, we can proactively try and find new people that will succumb or walk the talk. And I know when we ran an interview with Malcolm Staves, head of health and safety with L'Oreal, you may recall, you may know Malcolm. He made a really big point of, hey, if they don't see outcomes or change from their middle management, they're gone. What are your experience in terms of, it's pretty an aggressive way of doing it, but goes, hey, this is a priority. This is what we want to do. This is what we're going to push. What's your experience looking with the global companies that you've worked with, managing or trying to change that mentality, create that paradigm shift for that middle management layer that maybe some of a lot of the colleagues, the people on the line now are experiencing that pushback from an operational manager or a site manager or a lead manager or supervisors? What's your advice in that space?
Well, I met Malcolm in Berlin last year. He was he's a very interesting guy. We did a PhD I think 6 years ago now, and that literally talks about the difference between that middle management layer and the upper management layer. Well, the upper management layer was only making 3 decisions a year, and the middle management layer is making about 10,000.
Wow.
And it's so when we talk an awful lot about the mud layer, the middle management layer, and where things get stuck. Well, that's where the organization lives. So one of the things we do as a consultancy, and I'm not trying to be too commercial here, but so we try and find out, where do we all believe where the biggest change can be? Because if there's a lot of consensus where things can come unstuck and we can start moving, I'd rather work there than on the really hard parts where we don't think changes. We can make the change, or we can achieve what we want. But one of the things, if you look at the actual progression, especially from moving to properly structured rather than semi-structured, where kind of calculative, kind of reactive, that's actually making things, our internal processes work. And moving to context sensitive is actually moving decision-making requirements away from the middle management layer back down to the workforce. So you're empowering the workforce, which means you're also unloading that middle management layer. So it all has positives for everyone, because everyone feels happier. Because what we're trying to do is get the risk managed at the right place. Because the middle management has a very strong role in managing their risks, and senior management has a very strong role in managing their risks. But the operational risks, the frontline risks in the context, should be managed by the guys down on the ground.
Yep.
And there are no silver bullets for this. I've just written a paper about the variances in skill on the different parts of the ladder, and I state in it quite strongly that you may have the wrong people in the wrong spots. Mm-hmm. So my client over in Singapore at the moment, what they found, having put in place cross-functional teams, is that not all their team heads are the right people to run those teams. Now, that's because they're too technical and don't have enough non-technical skills. So they're putting them back into their engineering college to make them licensed engineers. Because they're very strong technical abilities, means that maybe they shouldn't be technicians, they should be engineers.
Yep.
And what they need is more managerial skills to run the cross-functional teams. Often when you find mismatches in these parts, the people that aren't working when you change paradigm are still very valuable people. Mm-hmm. But they may be in the wrong spots.
Interesting. Yeah, Clements has made a good point in the chat where she was. They've mentioned the stick approach on management doesn't work well for a worker because they're often the one that might be kicked out. But they've made a very good point that that on the other hand, if a person doesn't fit into a new company's culture and new company's ethos, it might be good that they've actually moved on, because having that bad apple in that one big, rest of everyone is actually on the journey, on the train. That one negative naysayer, it massively can affect their culture, right?
I'm a I'm a strong proponent of for the workforce, and I work with boards, I work with senior management, I work with middle management, and they always think it's the workforce's problem, or they don't. As we go up the ladder, they get do so less and less. But one of the things we will need to understand in our workforce is what work are we asking them to do, and as we progress up the ladder, if they can't do the work, they can't do the work. So what you'll find is when you've reached someone's ability level, if you go beyond that, they will become a malcontent. And there's nothing wrong with also making sure that your workforce is fit for the work you're doing. And that work is no longer just digging the coal out of the mine. It's also running your own mine, for example. And that's a completely different way of looking at it than, well, this is what we do. No, what we do is the whole work. I'm a big fan of Bill Belichick's saying, the New England Patriots coach, 6-time Super Bowl, actually 8-time Super Bowl champion. And he says, just do your job. Then do your job well and help other people do their job. The hard part is, what's your job? Now you've got a quite complex job, Craig, yourself, right? You do things, you run. Has anyone actually written down what actually encompasses all of your job?
No,
right, so our job descriptions are probably not as rich as we need them. As we want to develop our culture, we need to know more and more about what our jobs actually are.
Yep.
People that don't want to come along with that, far from psychological reasons or from ability reasons, it's okay to not have to lose people in that process. And that's not firing people, that may be just helping them find different opportunities. But if you now know that what you actually need from the job is not what you hired people for, because now we've changed our paradigm, we now changed our way of looking at the world, and now we realize actually what we're doing is much more complex, then it's okay to us admit as an organization that we've hired the wrong people.
Moving back to, there's a few good questions now coming through. I might move to some of those. There's a really similar one with Catherine and from Bjorn, who both ask a similar thing. Catherine asks, going back to that whole senior leadership component and actually walking the talk. Catherine asks, how do you, and I think we're actually looking now, moving from the theory component, Tim, to maybe some actual real examples that you might have seen out there. So she's asked, how do you recommend senior leaders demonstrate or communicate their commitment to safety? And then Bjorn asks, what are effective ways for leadership to show the commitment needed to change the culture? So what have you, and some of the actual examples of boots on ground that you've actually seen the leaders do? I think we'd love to see some of those.
I'm a huge fan of visible leadership, actually showing that you're out there, showing that you're understanding. And one of the things we see is that you, as senior leadership, if you're trying to show that you walk the talk, you need to ask the right questions when you're walking around the ground as well. So you're looking for pain points. You shouldn't just be looking, hey, oh, look, okay, he's doing well. Oh, great, yeah, he's wearing his hard hat. No, go out and actually talk to the troops. The best part, one of the great parts as senior leadership is that you're so far away from the troops that they don't feel their job is in danger. They'll tell you what's going on. And if you want to walk the talk, find some problems that they have and actually go out and solve them. You'll find that the things that they run into, the choke points they have, the pain points they have, are quite minuscule compared to the things that you think they're suffering from.
Mm-hmm.
Getting new follow restraints, or making sure that even just making sure that housekeeping comes by twice a day rather than once a day to make sure the area stays cleaner. It enables you to push your middle management, because this is the problem, right? If you're senior management, there's a mud layer between it. But if you're senior management, you can affect the ground floor just by affecting positive change. You can't change what the guys do or what the girls do. You can't change what your workforce does. you can help change their context. So if you want to show and demonstrate that you care and that you're actually working hard for them, demonstrate some real change on the work floor.
In a positive way. I remember one story. I had a client who had a rule in their warehouse that for the senior management team, you had to be only wear your PPE, your hard hat, your high-vis vest and your steel cap boots if you're more than 10 minutes in the warehouse, because the senior leadership team got really bored and annoyed with having to continually put on their PPE for a short visit to speak to the ops manager or the site manager, and so they put this rule of anything less than 10 minutes, no PPE required. And that just brought a terrible culture outcome as to why are they better than us? Why is that changing? So you have to look at the positive and actually flip it around the other way, isn't it? That visible leadership, but visible in a really positive way and seen to be creating change and creating positive change, not just talking it. And actually, and the visibility is great. It's a big step, but they need to then see the results, right?
They need to be heard and be seen to be heard, and then they need to be actually experience the change. If you can change what you can, then you will also be told the things you maybe have a harder time changing, but they'll accept what you are trying to do. So you can actually go, okay, like I've fixed the bits I could, right? And that one is a $500,000 thing. We're going to have to pull it in a lot along in the next budget cycle. But one of the things we've done is with a number of clients across industries, we've done hazard hunts, simple ways of improving workforce hazard awareness. They're not really worried about the outcomes, but what we found is, hey, we find all these problems, and we've brought senior management along, and they've gone, yep, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it, and the workforce is going, oh my God, I wish we told them before. The fix has taken up to half a year. But what we've then done is also made little booklets that showed what's been fixed. With the team that fixed it. They can take home and show their family and show them what they've done on all the positive parts. The senior leadership is showing their commitment and their desire to improve and create change by empowering that. And that creates that accountability as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the, obviously, EcoPortal, we're a risk management software provider, and we're modular based. So the clients come to us and determine, we want event management, we want hazard risk, we want meetings data, we want reporting, we want audits. But one of the modules we provide is safety observations. And you might get a safety walk or a safety tour or a safety observation in that space. And for ages, it was just used as a real compliance type process. But one positive that we've seen, Tim, recently is more companies are actually choosing to add that module to their list. But now, because of the focus is really on lead factors and reporting compared to the old lead lag factor, they're using these opportunities to get the senior leadership out and about, giving them their application on their mobile phone and going, right, board member, senior lead member, you have a KPI to get your bonus. You must deliver 2 or 3 safety walks every single month or every single quarter. And there must be actions component. You must detail what you've talked about, what were the subjects, who you spoke to, what were the outcomes, and what of those outcomes did you complete over that period of time. And it's because it's digital, it's easy, it's analytical, we can report on it, and they can manage their KPIs and their bonuses or whatever it might be for. But we're getting really good visible outcomes from that. So maybe on a positive, things are improving, because we're definitely seeing a linear increase in companies wanting to create that evidence in that chain.
I have a challenge about safety observations. I know everyone on this call should know at least, that the numbers are complete. They're not right, let's put it that way. And I'm in France, but we'll move away from the French there. I was working with a rather large metro company, and the board went like, well, we had 7,000 safety observations. We want 14,000 next year, and then are we better? What I've said, no, I want 100 safety observations, including the whole tale, as you just described, right? What's been done about it? Has it been fixed? Have we understood why it was happening in the first place? I want 100 high-quality ones rather than 7,000 low quality ones.
Yep.
But if you want to be calculative, if you want to make sure that things happen, you need to. Digital forms are so much easier. Don't do it in the minutes and meetings. Just have a database where it all goes into, and you can see what's happened with it. And you can see whether or not it's been cleared up, it's been finished, it's been solutioned, or so. And also, one of the fun things about better digital portals, let's put it that way. And I know that the Eco Portal is one. There are other providers out there as well, but we're all near one. It allows you as a senior manager, if you want to walk the talk, go and just look what's open.
Yeah.
And go and see if you can sort some of that out. So rather than the performative boots on, hats on, going, no, demonstrate real leadership by taking 30 minutes to sort out what is probably months worth of issues for other people.
That's a great idea.
It just signed off. It was right. I mean, like, okay, I work in oil and gas where I've met people that have a $10 billion signature on their own.
Yep.
Which is quite empowering, of course, but there's a balance to that as well, right? But we all have the ability to solve other people's problems. If you want to show leadership, you want to move the culture forward, then the way to do that, of course, is to find out what their problems are. It's a cheat sheet. If we have a list of open items and we have a list of observations and challenges we're still having, it's there.
Yeah.
Walking the talk doesn't mean that you have to do all the hard work. Walking the talk is being smart enough to understand all your systems and just go, all right, I want to go there, I want to go there, I want to go there. And then we're going to find out whether or not we can unclog the system. Now, but then you're at least looking at the pain points. People understand that you are trying to work on it. And if you're good at it, maybe you can get one of them going.
Yeah.
And that makes such a difference to everyone else. But you understand then that the problem is the organization. And the problem is always the organization. That's the problem with the organization.
Yeah.
So as a senior leader, you're the one that can move the organization.
Emma has asked, do you have any recommendations on how to change from a production-centric leadership to risk-centric leadership?
We used to think of production as a balance, which is valid only if you think about it in a two-dimensional way. Nowadays, I think I'm going to use some expensive words here. I think of it as a hyperdimensional tensor in a hyperdimensional space. We can improve our risk understanding and our risk management and improve our production at the same time. The way to do it is to seek to improve production using risk tools. So when I talk about changing our causal model and our causal factors, our causal understanding, if you can get management to understand that the way to improve production and the way to improve efficiency is to actually work on the underlying factors by changing their causal model, say moving to the more organizational or accident model, or hopefully even higher, you can understand that you can improve safety, you can improve risk management, and you can improve productivity at the same time. So my engine MRO client at the moment, they have safety problems and they have quality problems, but the causes for them are the same thing. So improve their quality problems will improve their safety problem, which allows them to now understand. Nowadays, they have a big grid, and it's really cool. And it shows not what's going wrong, it shows which cells, which modules inside their production set are at a higher risk of having issues, quality issues, safety issues, anything else. They also then know which cells they should leave alone or try and ring fence a bit and keep safe. But that means that the safety issues are reduced because the pressures from the rest of the organization are reduced, but the quality issues reduce as well.
Mm.
They go hand in hand, right? So how we do production is manage our operational risks. This is why I call myself operational risk rather than safety or quality or anything. If your management is still only focusing on production, and it's probably not only focusing, but there's a strong focus on production, linking the risk of reduction in production and the risk to people is a very natural thing to do, because the same organizational pathologies occur. The operational context that the failures happen in will be different, but it's the same causes. 80% of it is all the same thing. So let's work on that 80%, and it'll work on efficiency, it'll work on production, it will work on risk, it will work on health, it will work on safety. And we will do better. And it doesn't matter. So the answer is yes, but the way to do it is to bring production into risk, or risk into everything, because everything is risk.
Yep. Brilliant answer, Tim. That was fascinating.
The hard part is we end up being firefighter. We end up having this challenge where we're always solving yesterday's problem, and we can't solve tomorrow's problem. So we don't have the time to look forward and be in that proactive mindset. And it's a very, very tricky place to be. One of my clients has said, well, but Tim, you have to understand, we love firefighting. It's a very nice place to be, because you get rewarded every time because you've solved a problem.
We feel validated, yeah.
You feel much happier than I've solved a problem that's going to turn up 6 months down the line, and there's not nearly the same endorphin rush.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to be better, and we want to actually, one of my quality managers, I've set a goal for him. He can actually go and play golf in the morning. He doesn't play golf. But it'd be nice if he had the opportunity, rather than always having to be dealing with all the problems in the morning.
Sure. Yeah.
And the answer to that is we need to aggregate. We need to do meta-analysis. We need to understand those underlying organizational pathologies and use structures to address that. And that it's hard. And finding time to do it is hard as well. But we always find time for all our problems. So why don't we find time for the one problem we need to do to solve all our problems?
It's a great question. If we can solve that, we can take over the world. But hey, that looks like a wrap. Tim, thank you so much. One, for getting up so early in the morning. Two, for sharing such an amazing, lifetime of knowledge, of experience. Growing up with your father and the groundbreaking work that he initially did, and then obviously yourself and the team have taken that and grown the outcomes and the effectiveness of that theory and into real life. So it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for your time and your patience today. Thank you for listening to safetyCast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues, because safety knowledge is meant to be shared. Stay safe, stay engaged, and be sure to catch our next episode for more expert insights. See you then.